Welcome to the Financial Architects Podcast. I am your host, Evan Makovsky. I'm joined by partner Larry Steinberg. I hope everybody out there in podcast land and Larry had a happy Thanksgiving. Larry, you are known for two things: using the endowment model of investing and tax strategy. We've talked before about the endowment model and using alternative investments, but I've heard you say that taxes are actually the bigger deal, and we haven't really talked about them. What exactly do you mean?
Well, taxes are typically somebody's largest expense. And if somebody can keep more of their own money, that is going to put them in a better financial position, typically more than anything else will. Because the problem is when you're constantly paying taxes, you make money or you have profits on investments, you take two steps forward, but then you are always taking one step back as the government chips away at that. So, basically it's math, right? Math is if we can take two steps forward and not go back, we're ahead. So, the numbers are such that if we can just have you keep more of your own money, that's going to build wealth faster than any investment or strategy or anything there, simply looking at the tax side of things.
Gotcha. Are there really these giant tax holes, two systems, one for wealthy and another for everybody else?
Well, yes and no. I would characterize it more as that you've got to understand that how the tax system was designed. There's two kind of keys to the tax system. Our tax system was designed to influence behavior, right? Decision was made, we want to encourage home ownership in the United States. So there's a mortgage deduction that doesn't exist in other countries. And that encourages people to buy homes because the thought was part of the American dream is buying a home. Let's incentivize that, right? There's tax breaks for retirement. You get a deduction on an IRA or your 401k. So they're incentivizing you to save money for retirement. There's also sin taxes, right? If you buy alcohol or cigarettes, there's an extra big tax on there in order to make it more expensive. So maybe you'll buy less of it. So
how do you feel about that? I'm not kidding. How do you feel about that real quick?
The problem with it is that it ends up being a regressive tax where, it takes a bigger bite out of people that can't necessarily afford it, and it just hasn't been effective, right? It's created another system for government to spend money on certain pet projects, but it hasn't really decreased alcohol or tobacco usage. Now, granted, being the partial owner of a cigar place, I'm not exactly excited on it. Like if you know what a cigar costs and how much of that is taxes, you'd be shocked, right? Oftentimes the tax is more than the wholesale cost of the cigar. So that definitely affects things, but most people smoking cigars, I don't think are going to have a problem with, paying, they can afford it, right? And actually, I'm probably the least educated on cigars of any guy that owns a cigar place in the country. And cigars are something that I enjoy, but are not like a mainstay for me. But there are some friends that were interested in starting this, so I wanted to support them. And it's I've definitely learned a lot. Helps me with business owners having running a business itself, relating to them and some of the stuff they have. But I don't think it's been effective and produced the results that we want it to. And I do think it tends to affect the poor and the lower middle class more than it affects wealthier people. So I don't think cigars kind of fall in that range, but I don't think it's had the desired effect.
Got you. By the way, what we were just talking about before I took you off track there with the alcohol and tobacco tax. So these tax the wealthy, the poor, and taking advantage of what is available by getting quality advice. So what about your CPA? Is this done automatically?
Well, no, it's not done automatically. So one thing you've also got to understand about the tax code is that it's written by Congress, right? So people in Congress, they have a couple vested interests, right? One is to get reelected. So there's oftentimes tax breaks and tax incentives that are designed for constituents and donors. And Also, it's their own self-interest. If you want to know how, when they started IRA and they did the taxes, like, okay, why was it 59.5 before you could start taking money out, and then 70.5 before you had required minimum distributions? Like, the negotiating was around what affected some of the actual legislators at the time and what they needed and what they wanted. So, they're often doing things that is in their best interest, and incentivizing their donors and their constituents. So you got to understand that that's in there. And so because there's all of those things in there, there's a lot going on. And you're right, your CPA isn't going to automatically do that stuff, because the entire CPA exam there's not one word in there about reducing somebody's taxes. Your CPA, your tax preparer, their basic job is to be an outlet for the states and for the federal government and the IRS in order to do tax compliance and make sure people pay their appropriate taxes. There's not a lot of training, or basically no training, in like, okay, how do you reduce somebody's taxes? So a lot of CPAs, their idea of tax planning is like, okay, you can, let's say you're a business owner, you can buy a new truck and we can write that off, right, and save money on taxes that way, right? Or, hey, put money into a retirement plan, you can put X numbers of dollars in. But that's kind of the low-hanging fruit. That's not kind of the advanced type stuff that you can use. There's a lot of stuff in there that is designed to help, let's say, maybe a specific group, and we can adopt that and use that to help other people. So a lot of times the issue is just people don't know these things exist. They're not looking at it. They kind of assume their CPA tax person is doing that stuff, but they really aren't, because it's very difficult to stay on top of that and all of the other tax changes that happen out there. That's why we partner with CPAs. We'll use them to vet ideas we have. We'll use them and tax attorneys to, create things and to look at taking advantage of stuff that's out there and to vet different strategies. But, very, very few, CPAs are proactive in tax reduction because they've got so much on their plate already. And then even if they kind of figure out something in the tax code, that doesn't mean they know how to implement it. They need partners that can go in and actually implement some of the things that they may have learned about. That's kind of where we come in. We can actually take things from the code to implementation, because we've got a deep reservoir of people that we work with in different areas that can provide the strategies implementation, or we can provide it ourselves. We'll build something in order to do that. But it's really a lot more than a standard CPA can really take on. It's just they've got so much on their plate already, especially the last couple of years, massive tax law changes,
Obviously, there is a lot of validity to tax planning, as every financial advisor these days seems to talk about tax planning. So isn't that something everyone does?
Well, no, because, kind of when I reformulated the company roughly 10 years ago, and I took on a partner and we decided to focus. We started to focus on tax mitigation then, because we thought that was going to be one of the best ways to attract clients and provide value, right? And back then, I was literally the only financial advisor that I was running into that was talking about tax planning. But now everyone talks about a tax plan or tax strategy. But really what they're doing is kind of hitting the low-hanging fruit. They're kind of sitting there saying, hey, put money into your 401k, or, do a backdoor Roth IRA, or, let's look at your portfolio in December and sell losers and, take the tax deduction, right? And if there's something you want to get out of, we'll, sell your winner and, do that. But that's kind of the bare surface. That's not a lot. And then the people that are more advanced are usually pushing some sort of charitable tax strategy. And those are kind of inventions of the 1990s. And the problem with them is they typically involve, high cost insurance products. And the bigger problem is that they lock you into strategies that go out decades, or you're locked into your death. We do a lot of work fixing charitable strategies that have blown up because they weren't implemented properly, or, the person that sold them the, charitable remainder trust is disappeared, they've retired, they've moved on, they're not using anymore, and there's no one watching to make sure it gets done properly, or the taxes are done right, or that the required distributions are being taken. So we do a lot of work fixing these charitable strategies. But one of the kind of core most important things to me is that, you have flexibility in any kind of financial planning you do, because things don't always go according to plan, right? Like literally we have a black swan event every 10 years. So they're not really black swans. They're regular occurrences, and these can blow up those strategies very, very quickly. So you want to be flexible, right? I'd much rather have a tax reduction strategy that is not based on charitable giving and has more flexibility. And then if the person chooses to, like, just write a check to the charity, right? Or just support what you want to do, rather than something that maybe gives money to a charity in 30 years. I mean, in 30 years, that charity, you may not want to have that charity again. You know, I've had clients where it was like, they had a charitable remainder trust, and the beneficiary was the cheating ex-husband's alma mater university, right? Like, do they really want to make sure that that group gets the money? You know, so you know, and there's oftentimes no ability to make changes. So I don't like a lot of the charitable strategies. Now we'll use them in specific situations where, you know, it really makes sense, but 9 times out of 10, it's just a financial advisor looking for an insurance sale and a big commission, or to lock you into something that you can't get out of. So yeah, I'm not big in that. And those are the people that call themselves advanced strategists. They're not doing the kind of more advanced strategies that we're looking at, where we're looking at things that came out of the 2017 Tax Act with advanced depreciation and applying it in other places. We're doing stuff with the changes they made in retirement plan, you know, qualified retirement plans, 401k, defined benefit, profit sharing for companies, where they've changed it so that companies have a longer window to implement, right? And also a longer window to fund, because oftentimes some of these things, the problems are in the funding of it, right? If you've got the year after to get the money to save money on the prior tax year, that can be a big benefit. We also were, you know, so we're always constantly looking at new changes in the tax laws, and not just changes in the tax laws, but a big portion of it is like, how is the IRS and how are the state regulating things? Like something that may be good right now, in 5 years, there may be a pivot by the regulators on how they view it. So you need to be able to be on top of those changes and maybe pivot out or have some flexibility and do something different, or just adapt that to where it works now. So we're doing a lot more advanced type, you know, bigger things, requiring tax attorneys, CPAs, oftentimes requiring tax opinions, so that we can get a get out of jail card for our clients. So we're not talking about like the easy stuff that's attached to a life insurance sale. We're talking about things that oftentimes there may be no investment aspect to it, but it's going to, you know, we'll do it on a consulting basis. It's going to save our clients a lot of money, because we're working with a lot of people where they're sold a business or they sold a piece of real estate and they don't want to, and they want to look at other options other than more real estate, right? Or you know, they're an attorney and they settled 3 big cases in 1 year instead of 1, and so they have a big pop to their income, and they want to, you know, not necessarily pop themselves into a higher tax bracket. We kind of want to smooth things out, make them less of a target for the IRS, because the IRS goes after people that have changes, you know, sporadic changes. Even if they're legitimate, you kind of end up being targeted, and you know, we're looking to kind of smooth that out, make them less of a target for the IRS. And when they have those big years, like, be able to set that money aside, right, for the lesser years, right, but do it on a tax advantage basis. So we're doing a lot of stuff that's more than other advisors really do. In fact, our biggest competition, I would say, isn't financial advisors. Oftentimes, it's tax attorneys pitching different tax strategies, you know, rather than, you know, other financial advisors, because very few are doing the kind of advanced planning, advanced type stuff that we're doing. And a lot of times it's really important, because there's oftentimes, and we see this a lot, people that aren't super wealthy, but they have a one-time payout from something that's going to get crushed in taxes, you know, and if they lose a third of that money to taxes, it's going to materially impact their income, right? So if you're, you know, have had a house and now you're moving, you know, and that, you know, your bulk of your net worth is in that home and you're downsizing, right? And if you lose a third of the sale proceeds to taxes, well, and that's like, you know, 80% of your money. Well, now we're talking about you're going to take a 20 or 25% hit to your monthly income that comes off of how that money's invested. You know, for somebody that's, you know, super wealthy, you know, that's not a big deal. But if that's going to be $1,000 a month difference in your retirement income because you're not super wealthy, like, if we can help people do that, that's a really big effect for me, right? If I can take somebody from $3,000 a month in retirement income to 4,000 or 4,000 to 5,000, like that's a substantive big jump, right? And those people, oftentimes the tax code really treats people with a one-time profit off of the sale of a home or sale of a piece of business or sale of anything, treats them really unfairly. Like they're going to be in a low tax bracket their whole lives. And then the one time they have a bigger transaction, like they get crushed, and that really hurts their income over the long term. So if we can do things to kind of knock that down, that makes a big deal to me, because I really want to help people. And we do have a lot of very wealthy clients, but kind of our middle income clients too are very important to us, because we feel like we're making a really big substantive differences in their life and their lifestyle, and just in their ability to sleep at night.
Wow, there's a lot in there. Tough to unpack how you stay on top of tax law changes and everything you do with alternative investments and tax strategies. How do you do it?
Well, on the tax strategy side, we have a team, right? It's not me. We have actually a team of people. I'm more on the investment and the alternative investment side in the firm. And we have another partner that is in charge of tax strategy. But the other thing is that, like, we've been doing this for a while. So people, when they have new tax strategies and new, oftentimes alternative investment products built around a tax strategy, right? They typically come to us to be a vetter, and also to be, somebody that they might use it with, because they know we have already appetite for different things and different tax strategies. And then the other thing is, just because we've built up our network and our Rolodex over the years, like if we bring something in, we know which tax attorneys to take it to that will be super critical and beat it up, right? Everybody's going to say, oh, I've got this tax attorney and they love it. We want to take it to the people that are going to beat the crap out of it and say, here's your problems with it, right? Because we don't want something that's going to blow up down the line. So we take it to the most critical, tough attorneys to get them to pass it, and the most difficult CPAs to get things passed, to vet things for us, so that when we do something with a client that may be new, it's not going to be highly risk. And we're always making sure on anything, that there's a tax opinion attached to it. And then we've got to work, most of our business comes from CPA referrals. We because of that, and we're always looking at things that will help their clients. And what we're trying to do there is we're working with a certain kind of CPA. The CPA can't be afraid of an audit, right? If we can go save somebody $100,000 or $200,000 and it increases their chance of getting audited, and they may pay 10 grand for that audit, like they're still 90% ahead. Most CPAs are scared to go to audits. They don't want to fight with the state agencies, they don't want to go fight with the state of California or the state of New York or the state of Illinois, even if we know that they'll pass an audit and win, right? And that we've got a tax opinion, so that the worst case scenario for the client is they would have to pay the taxes that they otherwise would have had to pay, but they've had use of that money for maybe 5 or 10 or 15 years. Because a lot of times these things take a while to work through. Like, that's still a victory for the client. And so that's kind of the kind of stuff we're doing. We want to have, if we have downside, we want it to be, you get to borrow the money you would have had otherwise had to pay the IRS for 10 or 15 years, in which case you've been able to invest it and make more money off it, so that no matter what, they're ahead. And also, since we don't have, like, a lot of guys out there maybe have 1 or 2 strategies, we've got a dozen different strategies we're using, and we're vetting new ones all the time. We're oftentimes diversifying people among tax strategy as well, makes them a smaller target. But we got to have a CPA involved that's willing to go to bat for them, because we can make, literally millions of dollars difference for people over the years. And a lot of CPAs won't want to do that because they don't want to fight the IRS and charge the client 10 grand.
Larry, last one. You must be really busy every year when your clients are getting their taxes done.
Well, we are, because we're helping the taxes, the CPAs, as far as the information to file the taxes. But, the tax savings isn't when you go to your CPA to file, right? By that time, a lot of things you can do, or most of the things are done. You have to do it during the calendar year. So right now we're in December. It started December, Thanksgiving was last week. This is the time where the tax planning is most important. November and December is when we're doing all of our clients' tax planning meetings. And then we double down. This is when the majority of our new business comes in, because the CPAs we're working with are sitting down and talking to their clients and figuring out what they have to do. And that's when we get a lot of our new business. So the fourth quarter of years is our prime time. It's our busiest time. And that's because that's when we can make the most substantive difference for a client is the fourth quarter of the year, not waiting till the books are closed, right? There's really only a couple strategies out there that work after the fact and after the end of the calendar year. Most of it needs to be done ahead of time.
Got it. You're a fourth quarter player. What else do we want? Somebody who performs in quarter number 4. That's all we can ask for. Larry Steinberg, he's a partner, financial architect, spreading the wisdom like always on the Financial Architects podcast. Larry, thank you.
All right. Thank you, Evan. Great to see you again. And I guess that's a wrap.
That is a wrap. That's exactly right for Larry Steinberg. I'm Evan Makovsky. Thank you so much for listening to the Financial Architects podcast, and we'll see you next time.